Today, the Portland Trail Blazers had their schedule announced for the 2023 to 2024 NBA season. The schedule is the worst Blazers schedule I've ever seen in my life. That is not hyperbole, and I'm going to get into the reasons why. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We have a bunch of fun stuff coming for next season. Check out our second channel where we're streaming Mondays and Thursdays all throughout the offseason, link in description below. And also join our Discord, that is also linked in that description. Now let's start off with the preseason. The Blazers on October 10th will play the New Zealand Breakers. On October 12th, we'll play the Phoenix Suns. October 14th, the Utah Jazz. On October 16th, another matchup against the Phoenix Suns. And then 9 days off before the start of the regular season. This is a very slow start. Normally, preseason starts the first couple of days of October, and then the regular season starts around October 18th or 19th. This year, it's a whole week later, lining up more so with the start times the NBA used to have 10 years ago or so, and that leaves only 4 games in October for the Blazers. They start the season on the road against the Los Angeles Clippers. It always sucks starting the season on the road, especially having Scoot Henderson. I would have loved to have seen his NBA debut at home in the Moda Center. Instead, his NBA debut will come in LA. The first home game of the season for the Blazers comes against the Orlando Magic, which is kind of a weird team to open the season against at home, but it will be a matchup against Paolo Banchero and company. Banchero is from the Northwest, so that'll be a bit of a homecoming for him. And then the Blazers go on a 3-game Eastern Conference road trip to end October and head into November. Now, I'm not doing strength of schedule for the schedule breakdown as I have in years past. That's simply because I don't expect the Blazers to be a super strong team where strength of schedule is going to really matter. If you guys really want me to do a strength of schedule breakdown by month, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll probably just tweet it out or something. As far as this 3-game road trip goes, they go from Portland on the 27th all the way to Philadelphia to play the Sixers on the 29th, then the second night of a back-to-back head to Toronto. Then, to start off November, they play on the road against Detroit, and then their Eastern Conference road trip is done. And this is the first sign of a bad schedule when the Blazers are traveling all the way from the Pacific Northwest to the East Coast and only playing 3 games. That's a lot of flight mileage for only 3 Eastern Conference games. It's a little easier on the Blazers' mileage if they knock out as many Eastern Conference teams at once in a road trip. But the NBA didn't set things up that way. So the Blazers immediately come home and play against the Memphis Grizzlies, and this is the first game in the NBA's new in-season tournament. I think that'll be a pretty hyped up matchup, as you'll have Scoot Henderson versus Ja Morant's suspended, never mind. So that might actually be a winnable game for the Blazers. And then they play Memphis again on Sunday, November 5th. That's not an in-season tournament game, so nowhere near the hype for that matchup as the one before it. And this is the first of 7 instances where the Blazers will play the same team twice in a row. I hate that the NBA has started doing this. It's not baseball. There's 82 games in a season. There's off days in between almost every single game. I understand that it might cut down on travel, but when you're playing 2 games in a row at home, does it cut down on travel at all? No. It's fine when there's a couple instances scattered throughout the season, but if I recall correctly, 2 years ago, there was 3 instances of this. Last year, I believe there was 5, and this year, there's 7 instances. I just don't like that. Let me know what your thoughts on playing the same team twice in a row are down in the comment section below, because I'm sure some of you feel the way that I do, and I'm sure some of you don't care at all. So I'm curious to see what the consensus is on that. After this Memphis back-to-back, the Blazers actually only have 1 game in a week. They start a 3-game road trip where they play the Kings on November 8th on a Wednesday, but then they'll probably come home because their next game isn't until Sunday, November 12th against the Los Angeles Lakers. And then on November 14th, they face the Jazz, which is the second in-season tournament game. Second night of a back-to-back, they play Cleveland at home, and then they play their third in-season tournament game against the Lakers on November 17th. The Blazers' in-season tournament games, compared to the rest of the field, are relatively early. In-season tournament games are set on specific days, and the Blazers finish things up on November 21st, which I think is as early as any other team does. So the Suns are that team. It's a single-game road trip at Phoenix. Around that game are matchups against Oklahoma City and Utah. And then the Blazers end the month of November with a 3-game Eastern Conference road trip where they play the Milwaukee Bucks, Indiana Pacers, and Cleveland Cavaliers. For the month of November, the Blazers play 14 games in 30 days. They have 6 home home, 8 on the road. They have 3 back-to-backs and 3 stretches of 2 days off or more. Heading into December, the Blazers will play 13 games in 31 days. 2 of those games are in-season tournament knockout round games or to-be-determined normal regular season games. The Blazers might play 14 games in December if they can make it to the finals of the in-season tournament. And the month of December is a bit easier than the month of November in terms of games played. They play 8 at home and 3 on the road. 2 games to be determined as part of that in-season tournament thing. They have 2 back-to-backs and 3 stretches of 2 days off. After finishing up their in-season tournament and playing on the road against the Clippers, the Blazers only play 1 road game between December 12th and January 1st. That's a 3-week stretch where their only road game is on December 23rd against the Golden State Warriors. As part of this home slate, the Blazers will play a lot of Western Conference teams. Utah, again, all their games are early in the season. That is actually the 4th game against the Jazz. Then they play Dallas, Golden State, Phoenix. Washington is an Eastern Conference team, and that is the Blazers' first game on NBA TV of the season. Kind of weird matchup to throw on NBA TV, considering the Wizards, I think, this year are going to be awful. Should be a game that the Blazers can actually win. And then after that road game against Golden State, they play the Sacramento Kings on December 26th. And then they have back-to-back games against the San Antonio Spurs. So that, of course, is Wemby versus Scoot. And it's not going to be nationally televised. And it's going to be on back-to-back nights. I don't really understand why the NBA did that. I thought the NBA should put a lot of hype around Portland versus San Antonio's first matchup this year, Scoot versus Wemby. I thought it should have been nationally televised, and they didn't. The NBA doesn't want to nationally televise anything regarding the Portland Trailblazers except for a specific game that I will talk about in a bit. So that wraps up the month of December as we head into the month of January. You know how there's a lot of home games in December? Well, you got to play road games at some point, and the Blazers play a ton of them to start the year of 2024. They go on a 7-game road trip, including a couple of Eastern Conference teams. On the 1st of January, they play Phoenix again, then another 2-game series against the same team, facing Dallas on January 3rd and January 5th. Then they fly all the way up to New York City to play Brooklyn on the 7th and the Knicks on the 9th, before coming back to the Western Conference playing OKC on the 11th and Minnesota on the 12th. As I said earlier, it seems like the schedule sets up for a lot of flight miles for the Portland Trailblazers because they're not knocking out their Eastern Conference games in bunches. In this road trip, they head all the way to New York to play the Knicks and the Nets, and that's it. No other Eastern Conference teams on this road trip. Then the schedule kind of balances out. They come back home, play the Suns, the Nets, and the Indiana Pacers before a 4-game road trip, which should be an interesting one, as you got the Lakers, you got the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I think will be a play-in team at minimum this year. The Houston Rockets, that's actually the first matchup against the Rockets. Amen Thompson versus Scoot Henderson should be a fun matchup. And then Wemby versus Scoot, 3.0 at this point, and this one is actually nationally televised, only on NBA TV, but at least it's nationally televised. And that wraps up that 4-game road trip. And then Chicago on the 28th, Philadelphia on the 29th, and Milwaukee on the 31st of January to finish things off. That's 3 Eastern Conference teams at home to end the month. If that seems like a lot of games in January, it's because it is. That's 17 games in one single month, the most that I've ever seen from a single month in a schedule breakdown. 11 of them are on the road, they have 3 back-to-backs, and only 1 stretch of 2 days off. January is the worst month that I've ever seen in a Blazers schedule, ever. Other than maybe another month in the schedule that we have yet to get to. 17 games in 31 days is insane to me. 11 on the road, 3 back-to-backs. That's just gross, man. And maybe this is just what happens when you're a team that everybody expects to tank now and is a bottom feeder. I don't know. But my goodness, that stretch is absolutely brutal. In February, the Blazers start things off with 2 road games in Denver against the defending champion Nuggets. Then they have 3 days off that I'm sure they'll all embrace before facing the Detroit Pistons on February 8th, the Pelicans on February 10th, and then 2 games in a row before the All-Star break against the Minnesota Timberwolves at home. Man, I hate back-to-back games against the same team. Then the Blazers have the All-Star break, and then they play Denver for the 3rd time in February on the 23rd, Charlotte on the 25th, that'll be Brandon Miller versus Scoot Henderson, and then on February 27th on TNT, the Blazers host the Miami Heat. So the NBA is the NBA is betting on Dame getting traded to Miami, and this being Dame's return to Portland and his homecoming game. That's the only nationally televised game for the Blazers outside of NBA TV all season long. Now, an interesting thing about the schedule is that the Blazers play 2 road games at the start of the month on the 2nd and 4th, and then don't play another road game the entire month, because they have the All-Star break in there, and they play a bunch of home games. So the Blazers won't play a single road game between February 4th and March 1st. I don't know if I've ever seen a stretch that big where the Blazers won't play a road game. So for all the punishment they suffered in January, at least they get to sleep in their own beds for the majority of February. There's no back-to-backs in February. There's 2 stretches of 2 days off, not counting the All-Star break. There's also a stretch of 2 days off and a stretch of 3 days off in this month. Then we jump into March, where the Blazers will play 17 games in 29 days. 17 games in 29 days. That's absurd. When you look at January and the 17 games in 31 days for the Blazers in that month, that's the most I've ever seen. March is even more jam-packed somehow. The Blazers will play 4 back-to-backs in this month. They only have 1 stretch of 2 days off, and that's at the end of the month, on the 30th and 31st of March. They play 9 games at home, 8 on the road, so at least the travel isn't as bad as January, but my goodness, the schedule freaking sucks. To start March, the Blazers will head all the way over to Memphis, which might as well be an Eastern Conference team, to play back-to-back games against the Memphis Grizzlies before they head up to Minnesota on March 4th, and then they come home for a 6-game homestand. It'll be interesting to see if the Blazers are tanking at this point in the season or not. Of course, there's a lot that determines that, including the Dame saga. But after the 6-game homestand, the Blazers then go on a 2-game road trip where they play the New Orleans Pelicans and the Chicago Bulls. That's right. That's a 1-game Eastern Conference road trip if you're just counting Chicago. And then the Blazers fly all the way back from Chicago to Portland to play home games against the Los Angeles Clippers twice in a row. And then the Blazers play the Nuggets on March 23rd for the 4th and final time before a 7-game road trip where they actually have a legitimate Eastern Conference road trip. That's because they start things off in Houston on the 25th, then make trips to Atlanta, Miami, Orlando, Charlotte, Washington, and Boston. So at least they gave the Blazers 1 solid Eastern Conference trip over this entire schedule. At least this Eastern Conference trip wasn't split into 3. It's also a very weird time to have such an Eastern Conference road trip. In the past, it seemed like the NBA has tried to match teams up from the same division or at least the same conference during the stretch run of the NBA season. But the final division game is that March 23rd game against Denver. With teams like Orlando, Charlotte, and Washington on that schedule, it'll be interesting to see if that's a tank race. Also, that March 29th game against Miami could be the 2nd game against Dame. Then the final 3 home games of the year come against the New Orleans Pelicans, Golden State Warriors, and Houston Rockets. And then the Blazers finish the season at Sacramento. Last year, they started the season at Sacramento. This year, they finish it on April 14th, a 12:30 game on Sunday. And as far as April goes, that's 3 home games, 5 road games, 1 back-to-back, no stretches of 2 days off or more. That is 8 games in 14 days. Anyway, that wraps up the schedule breakdown. Let me know what you think of the schedule down in the comment section below. I'm very excited for next season because it's going to be fun to see Scoop play. It's going to be interesting to see what the resolution to the Dame saga is. And it's going to be fun bringing all the new kinds of content that I'm going to bring you guys next year. So I'm very excited for the season. Don't let this negative schedule review sway you otherwise. I just think the schedule honestly sucks. It seems like the flight miles are bad. Maybe we can get a total on that. But if the flight miles aren't bad, it's because the Blazers have 7 instances where they play back-to-back games against the same team. Going on a 2-game road trip at New Orleans and Chicago, and then coming back home to play the Clippers without more than a day of rest in between each is one of the silliest things I've ever seen in a schedule. 2 months with 17 games, including a stretch of 17 games in 29 days in March. I mean, I don't know how you can think the schedule is anything but kind of screwy for the Portland Trail Blazers. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and let me know what you're looking forward to seeing next season out of your Portland Trail Blazers. And with that being said, that's a wrap for this video. I'll catch you next time. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.